I'm not happy.
I don't need Elizabeth Warren or the government giving away my money.
Calling Mike Bloomberg an oligarch has implications in this country that I think are unfair and unreasonable.
I care. That's it.
Makes you think of some rich person who got their money off of oil in Russia, who's taking advantage of a broken and dysfunctional system.
Bernie Sanders saying, the country's corrupt, our system's corrupt. Be careful about that language, Bernie. You know, be careful.
Oh, well, I'm sorry.
Now witness the firepower of this fully armed and operational battle station.
Clean coal, meaning they're taking out coal, they're going to clean it.
Around the nation, Waldorf Nation. What's up, everybody? Tuesday. We got a good show for y'all today. Welcome, welcome, welcome. All right, so if you're unfamiliar with the show, I am Jeff Waldorf, your host. And I'm going to be taking you through some of the stories that I found very interesting here and fun, also disastrous for the country. So please, if you haven't already, hit that like button. And if you enjoy this and you want to see more shows, please subscribe. It's very important that you do so. Hello to everybody out there, Twitch, Facebook, and YouTube, the live audience, live show, fun times. So, all right, with that, let's get to a breakdown of what we're doing. So we have, of course, a fun story. We got Joe Biden answering questions from Peter Doocy, and it's about Ukraine. So interesting. We can talk about that. We got Trump alleged to have had burner phones on January 6th. There seems to be a mysterious gap in the call records. We're going to talk about that. We got Trump asking Putin for dirt on Joe Biden. No, that's not an old story. That's a new story. It's a new story. What is going on? We got CBS News getting a lot of flack for their newest hire. So all of that, more. We've got fun. Let's dive into it. Before we do, of course, I do want to thank some people from yesterday for their super chats. In fact, at the end of the day, yesterday, Mr. Shadow gifted a very kind $5 in super chat. I'm sorry, with a super sticker. And Anon gifted very kind $5. And also just became a member. So you can become a member by hitting the join button below, along with Anon. Awesome. So thank you. Welcome. All right. Be careful, Bernie. Don't upset Chris's Matthews gravy train. He'll do it himself. And he did. And he did. Fun. All right. So, with all that out of the way, why don't we dive into the show? And we'll start out with Joe Biden. Oh, okay. Clarification. That's always good, right? All right. During a recent press conference on the topic of Ukraine and Russia, President Biden was asked by a Fox reporter, Peter Doocy, he was asked to clarify some remarks that he had made, to which, of course, Biden responded with some dismissal. So I'm going to go through, I'm going to show you the video, and I'm going to decide, I'm going to be the ultimate arbiter of whether or not this question was stupid. Well, I mean, without further ado, let's do it.
It sounded like you told U.S. troops they were going to Ukraine. It sounded like you said it was possible the U.S. would use a chemical weapon, and it sounded like you were calling for regime change in Russia, and we know...
None of the three occurred.
None of the three occurred?
None of the three.
Mr. President?
You interpret the language that way. I was talking to the troops. We're talking about helping train the troops that are the Ukrainian troops that are in Poland. That's the context. I sat there with those guys for a couple hours.
And when you said a chemical weapon use by Russia would trigger a response in kind?
It will trigger a significant response.
What does that mean?
I'm not going to tell you. Why would I tell you? You got to be silly.
The world wants to know?
The world wants to know a lot of things. I'm not telling them what the response would be. Then Russia knows the response.
All right, so, yeah, the world wants to know. The world wants to know. Oh, obviously the world wants to know. Well, I guess that I should tell you all of my plans. What kind of question is that? What kind of response is that? Like, why would you ask me something like to literally give you the response on if Russia violates this, red line, like, and does chemical weapons? Look, odds are they probably don't know exactly what the response would be. I'm sure they have several options. But no, Peter Doocy's like, well, the world wants to know, especially Russia. So, why don't we just tell them? No. Now, look, going to that statement from Biden, I'm glad he clarified because, yes, when he said respond in kind, obviously that gets people a little bit concerned. But look, what he's really talking about and what he clarified to mean that we've got a rhetorical red line, there's a threat, right? And it's an implied threat, obviously. Now, that said, a threat doesn't necessarily always have to mean military force. I know Peter Doocy is not exactly the smartest guy, and a lot of the press can't seem to understand that you can do things without just bombing everyone and starting wars. I know the press seems to be very, very war hungry. But look, obviously, I don't know what Biden means by, that threat, significant. I hope we don't ever find out. That said, I think, Biden's clarification is fine. I think it's a fine answer. And I do like, honestly, I do like the condescension. I do like it when Joe Biden gets a little testy, shows a little energy, you know what I'm saying? And pushes back on the press, especially when they decide to ask stupid questions. And sometimes they do, by the way. And by the way, I also like it when the press asks the president tough questions as well. That, not really a good question. Not really a tough question. I'll show you one later that it's a little bit better, but also still a little, in my opinion, war hockey. Now, that said, I think it's good that we're not going to use chemical weapons against Russia if Russia uses chemical weapons against Ukraine. You know why? Because that would be a war crime. That would be several war crimes, from a couple of different countries, and then also lead us into a disastrous war that could end with the end of life on Earth if it gets into a nuclear exchange. So I'm glad we're not going in that direction. Now, as far as significant, look, right now the Biden administration has been doing some very tough sanctions against the Russian economy. That's been devastating for them. The ruble is now trading incredibly valued, incredibly low. The Ukrainian resistance on the ground in Ukraine has been very fierce. And now we do have some, I think, positive news when it comes to the quote unquote military operation invasion near Kiev. It looks as though it's possible, at least they're in discussions for a ceasefire. I think that's a good thing. That would be an overall welcome development. But as always, the situation, of course, is fluid. We don't know what's going to happen. And as we're right now, even during the talks, Russia has not ceased their attacks. And I think that's important. That said, press, look, I've said it before, corporate press is always thirsty for war. Very, very thirsty. They're wanting it. And so, look, to give an example of this current issue with Ukraine, you had the mainstream press really pushing for that no-fly zone. Now, here's the thing. Let me remind them that a no-fly zone is not a magic anti-plane shield, okay? It doesn't just like deflect planes that you can't fly into it like, oh, it's a no-fly zone. It means that nothing can fly there. No. It means that US and NATO fighter jets will be patrolling that area, and if a Russian jet enters that airspace, our jets will shoot them down. You know what that means? That means war. Okay? So that means war with Russia. War with Russia, once again, not a good thing. We would like to avoid that. And it seems like Biden also really wants to avoid war with Russia. In fact, here is another reporter. I don't really know her name, but she asks once again for him to clarify some remarks he made about how Putin cannot remain in power. So all this kicked off a conversation where some people think that, oh, Biden's going to do a regime change war. And so let's get to that video and that reaction.
Can you help us understand, you have more foreign policy experience than any president who's ever held this office. Whether those are your personal feelings or your feelings as president, do you understand why people would believe you, as someone commanding one of the largest nuclear arsenals in the world, saying someone cannot remain in power is a statement of U.S. policy? And also, are you concerned about propaganda use of those remarks by the Russians?
No and no.
Tell me why. You have so much experience. You are the leader of this country.
Because it's ridiculous. Nobody believes we're going to take down. I was talking about taking down Putin. Nobody believes that. Number one. Number two, what have I been talking about since this all began? The only war that's worse than one intended is one that's unintended. The last thing I want to do is engage in a land war or a nuclear war with Russia. That's not part of it. I was expressing my outrage at the behavior of this man. It's outrageous. It's outrageous. And it's more an aspiration than anything. He shouldn't be in power. There's no, I mean, people like this shouldn't be ruling countries, but they do. The fact they do, but doesn't mean I can't express my outrage about it.
All right, so look, let me just start off by the ass kissing, right? So, not me, that reporter, you have the most foreign policy experience ever in a modern president. Well, look, I actually don't have a problem with his foreign policy as president, but I do remember, of course, that he was had made some foreign policy blunders back during the day. For example, authorized the use of military force in Iraq and Afghanistan. And so that is something that what it looks like he's learned from. And so, look, the framing here from that reporter is, yes, you've got this experience. And so when you say things like Putin cannot remain in power, that makes us think regime change war. And are you worried about the propaganda? Now, of course, propaganda is propaganda. Every country uses propaganda. So I wouldn't be surprised if, yes, Putin would use that. Yeah, of course, of course. But regardless, they would still find something to propagandize about. And so, I don't know. I think while it is a fair question, because he did say that, it still makes it feel like that you have the press that is like thirsty and just trying to push us, beating the war drums to get us into World War III. And I don't agree with that. I don't think that's a good position to be in. And thankfully, Biden also thinks that it's not a good position to be in. And is very, very clear, very forceful, very aggressive in saying, we are not going to go that route, all right? And so, again, I think he's learned from Afghanistan and Iraq. Those two wars were absolute debacles. We also, for example, under Obama had Libya. Once again, regime change operation. That turned out to be disastrous for the Libyan people. And so, look, and by the way, I'm not saying that Gaddafi and Saddam were, good people, right? No, it's just an example of how regime change wars don't work. It's true. And so, look, Biden, I think he learned from that. He voted for the Iraq war, but then admitted that it was a mistake, and I think it's good. So, again, he's very aggressive in his response, and I like that he was aggressive. And I like that he was saying, I don't like Putin. I wish he wasn't in power. That's my personal belief. That's not reflective of the foreign policy of the United States. We're not going to invade Russia. We're not going to kick off a war. And so, look, I've been very, very open about Biden's domestic policy and how he has not been doing a great job on economic or domestic policy positions. But when it comes to, and by the way, that includes his new budget that increases Pentagon funding. Now, there's an increase in taxes on the rich. That's great. That's in that budget. But also, he asked for more Pentagon funding, which I think is disastrous. But overall, when it comes to Ukraine, when it comes to foreign policy, when it comes to Russia, I think he's done very, very well, despite the press, I think, pushing him on the issue of war. And so, well done on that one. Peter Doocy, sit down. Okay. All right. Biden botched. The walk back is better than most. Yeah, I think Biden misspeaks a lot. I think he really does. And that's kind of like the old man thing, you know? Like, I'm a little older, but kind of a regular guy, kind of speaks my mind a little bit. But I will misspeak sometimes, and oopsie. But anyway, there's that. I still think it's a good clarification, good answer. And so, all right. Moving on, let's go to the Trump burner phones. That's a fun story. The new report out by journalists Bob Woodward and Robert Costa, and it's fueling some accusations that former President Donald Trump had been possibly using some burner phones or back channels to communicate to who knows who, right, during the January 6th Capitol riots. This is the time where, of course, the Capitol was under assault by MAGA chuds. Now, the accusations came from the fact that there seems to be some missing time from the White House phone records, meaning there is about almost 8 hours, 7.5 hours, specifically of no records, no phone calls whatsoever. Huh. Interesting. Now, here's Woodward and Costas reporting in the Washington Post, quote, internal White House records from the day of the attack of the U.S. Capitol were turned over to the House Select Committee show a gap in President Donald Trump's phone logs of about 7 hours and 37 minutes, including the period when the building was being violently assaulted, according to documents obtained by the Washington Post and CBS News. The lack of an official White House notation of any calls placed to or by Trump for 457 minutes on January 6, 2021, from 11:17 a.m. to 6:54 p.m., means that the committee has no record of his phone conversations as the supporters descended on the Capitol, battled overwhelming police, and forcibly entered the building, prompting lawmakers and Vice President Mike Pence to flee for safety. Yes. So, hold on here. So, no records for 7.5 hours on that day where, again, you had all this madness going on. And of course, I can see it now, right? The response is, well, of course you didn't have anybody talk to you. He was too busy presidenting. No, you're kidding. No, that's super shady. Super shady. I mean, again, you want to tell us that during this incredibly tense moment, the president was not talking to anyone? Or that nobody was calling him? Nobody? No bullshit. Nobody believes it. Nobody believes it. Now, the records do show that Trump was active on the phone for part of that day, but then switched over, allegedly. There were conversations that he had with at least 8 people in the morning and 11 people in that evening. But then, during that time, between 11 and about 7, no calls. None. Now, look, I've talked about how there were calls between Trump and Senator Mike Lee. So now what's funny about that is he calls up Mike Lee and he wants to talk to Tommy Tuberville. Why didn't you just call Tommy Tuberville? What? That doesn't make any sense. And then, of course, conversations that he had with House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, also documented calls between him and Steve Bannon. And so, again, here you have, obviously, Donald Trump. Look, Donald Trump's a phone addict. He's basically incapable of shutting the fuck up. I think this is common knowledge. So when you look at this mysterious gap, you think, what is going on here? What the hell? What the hell? And so you get these records, and by the way, they came from the National Archives to the January 6th committee. Well, now you've got the House that's like, oh, wait a minute. This is interesting. Why don't we look into maybe the fact that he has some alternative methods of communication, since we have these records that seem to be missing. So the House panel is investigating, according to the report, whether Trump communicated that day through the back channels, phones of aides, or personal disposable phones known as burner phones, according to 2 people with knowledge of the probe, who, like others interviewed for this report, spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss sensitive information. So, look, we all know what a burner phone is. It's one of those cheap prepaid ones. Very, very hard to trace. If you want to do something shady, I would use one of those. Which, again, is probably why it's a favor of criminals. And Donald Trump, which I guess would be, redundant in this case. At least according to people familiar with his activities, he was always using these alternative methods of communication, including these burner phones. Or other means to hide who was calling. In fact, from the report, occasionally when he made outbound calls, the number would show up as a White House switchboard number instead of president's office, according to a former Trump cabinet official. Other times he would call from different numbers, or no number would appear on the recipient's phone. Just imagine, okay, it makes me think of a hilarious scenario, possible scenario of like somebody, because like when I get a call and I don't see the number, I don't recognize the number, I don't pick it up. I'm like, no, I'm not interested. And then sometimes you get like the scam likely. Oh, imagine getting a call from President Trump from one of these burners and having it show up as scam likely. It would be literally the most appropriate thing to ever pop up. That'd be great. That said, in a statement on Monday night, Trump refuted this and he said, quote, "I have no idea what a burner phone is. To the best of my knowledge, I have never even heard the term, never heard it before. Don't know what a burner phone is. I don't know. No, okay, great. I have no idea what a burner phone is. Sure, Jan, of course. Look, the committee is also scrutinizing whether it received the full calls, logs from that day. Back to the report here. One lawmaker on the panel said the committee is investigating a possible cover-up, no kidding, of the official White House record from that day. Another person close to the committee said a large gap in records is of intense interest to some lawmakers on the committee, many of whom have reviewed copies of the documents. Both spoke on the condition of anonymity and all that stuff. So now, obviously, yes, I think Donald Trump is considered, is involved in a cover-up. Yes, he's covering things up. He's covering up many things, great many things. Probably even things that he doesn't even have to cover up. He probably covers up anyway. I mean, come on. Yes, he doesn't want to have anyone to have his records at all. And look, we know from previous reports, he would go to extreme lengths to hide those records. He would rip up his papers, his, logs and everything like that. And then aides were forced to tape things back together after he would throw it around like confetti. And so, yeah, there's that. And then, of course, there's the shredding the documents and then flushing them down the toilet. Hi, if I flush it down the toilet, it disappears with the rest of my logs.
Big, massive dumps.
All right, that was uncalled for in this very, very serious story. But no, the guy, buries everything. And so, yes, he goes to weird, unorthodox methods to try to get rid of documentation. And so that's why we're missing a lot of things. And so him using a burner phone, not surprising at all. Not surprising at all. Now, I think, by the way, I think it's pretty clear that he's got a lot to hide. For example, the call with Steve Bannon, or maybe many calls with Steve Bannon, who, by the way, were working with Peter Navarro to do the Green Bay sweep. Now, that Green Bay sweep was to pressure Mike Pence into not certifying the election. Then they were going to run a huge propaganda campaign for about the next 24 to 48 hours. After the lack of certification, that was going to coincide with fake electors in these states that were going to send in basically fake documentation saying that we do not accept the election results. And here's the real electors, even though they're not the real electors, they were the fake electors that were going to cast their electoral votes for Donald Trump, basically handing him the presidency and doing essentially a soft coup. So I'm pretty sure that if you're having those conversations with Steve Bannon or you're asking for updates, you're not going to want people to see that. You're not going to want people to know that you are in the midst of these conversations that are treasonous. So, and again, one of the calls that they do have records for was in the morning where Bannon urged Trump to pressure Pence to block the certification. And this is according to people familiar with that exchange. They also found several unreported exchanges in those records, the records they have, including other brief calls with Bannon and lawyer Rudy Giuliani that same morning before Trump had a final call with Pence, in which the vice president said, I'm not going to go along with, blocking Congress from formalizing Biden's victory. The call to the vice president was part of that plan, the Green Bay sweep. So now, I think this seems pretty clear. Yes, Trump used burners, back channels, very, very likely, in order to try and coordinate his basically theft of the 2020 election, attempted theft, his conspiracy to do election fraud. That's my personal view of it. I'm wondering if the committee is going to come to the same conclusion. In fact, I think they will. Look, there's a recent court filing from the January 6th committee, and they asserted that it's got some pretty good faith basis for concluding that the president and the members of his staff, of his campaign, had engaged in criminal conspiracy to defraud the United States and obstruct the counting of electoral votes by Congress, and more likely than not, committed a federal crime in trying to do so. That's pretty clear, right? That's really, really important. That's devastating. More likely than not, committed a crime. So now what worries me here is, okay, what are we going to do about it? We got some pretty good evidence here, but is it going to be enough? And I am always concerned that no, it will not be. Somehow, guy's going to weasel out of it. Again, that's my personal fear here. Either he's going to weasel out of it somehow, or he's going to be defended by the Republican establishment, or for some reason they might choose not to indict, which would seem very strange. But then again, look at the case that happened in Manhattan, where you had a new district attorney that decided, ooh, we're not going to do that. We're not going to indict. So look, I have those concerns. I am worried that we're not going to see any sort of accountability for the stuff that continues to come out. I mean, we're seeing it. The evidence continues to stack up. And yet, I don't know. We're going to have to wait and see what the committee does, what kind of power they're able to wield, and really what the Republicans will do in response. And I think that's really, really important. And so, let's see. Hopefully things are starting to fall into place. That said, let's go to the response here from Fox News. On Tuesday, the Washington Post released a bombshell report about Donald Trump using possible back channels and burner phones to communicate to others during the January 6th Capitol insurrection. So, look, the use of burner phones and back channels, AIDS phones possibly, would be to basically try to sidestep the Presidential Records Act and hide any possible conversations that might not look good for the January 6th committee. Now, this is reporting from Bob Woodward and Robert Costa. And look, the speculation basically comes from nearly 8 hours of White House phone logs that are missing. Just gone. They're not there. So now that said, Donald Trump has said, I don't know what a burner phone is. I don't know. Never heard of it. Coffee boy, things like that. Covfefe. I don't know. All right. Well, there's that. But here's but what does Fox News have to say about this? Well, we do have some reporting. Take a look.
Over to the January 6th committee reportedly show a 7-hour gap in Trump phone calls that very day. According to those reports, the panel is now investigating whether the former president used back channels or burner phones to communicate with others, including during the attack on the Capitol. And this all comes as members of the January 6th panel voted unanimously to hold former Trump aides Peter Navarro and Dan Scavino in contempt for refusing to comply with a congressional subpoena to testify. The full House votes later this week to send the contempt of Congress citations to the Justice Department for potential prosecution.
And that was it. That was about 36, 37 seconds. And that was all the reporting they've done on it so far all day. That's it. So here we have a gigantic report of evidence, possible evidence of Donald Trump hiding conversations during the Capitol riots, and Fox News says, we're going to spend a half a minute on it. Just about. Barely, in passing. Now, you want to compare that to the breathless reporting about Hunter Biden and his laptop. You get to see a very clear agenda here when it comes to what they're reporting. All right? I mean, again, Donald Trump literally tried to steal an election. That's really big news, but they're not reporting that. Well, they're barely reporting that, I should say. And so what I'm seeing here is minimal reporting, downplaying, until, of course, they have the talking points. So now the talking points are going to come up in their opinion shows. And so I think they're going to go with, I don't know, fake news, witch hunt. Just because you don't have any records doesn't mean you did anything wrong. Or they're just going to go, Hunter Biden. Hunter Biden. Look, they're going to distract you. They're going to distract people with something else, and we've seen this movie before. Now, I love the irony here that you have a president who cried about Hillary Clinton deleting 33,000 emails. This guy shredded it and hid his own records. I mean, again, it's true. Some of those records were ripped up. Aides had to tape them back together. He threw them around like confetti, tried to flush others down the toilet, literally clogging up the toilets. But no. But her emails. Her emails. No, they don't care. They don't care about being even, right? They don't care about reporting the truth. And now look, we're being, I'm honest about this, okay? There's no president that's really been super stringent about the Presidential Records Act. It's true. It's true. Obama's had some missing records, things like that. Other presidents, not very stringent, right? But that said, no other president but Trump has been so absolutely blatant about hiding, about doing this, right? About hiding things, about trying to rip up records. Clinton's private server, I remember reporting on that. I said it wasn't good. I said it was a bad thing. I said it was a security risk, and I stand by that. But then you also had the Trumps that had their own private server. And when you look at it, Clinton, Obama, and Biden, well, they never took part in an insurrection against their own government and then tried to hide the evidence. And so there's a big difference here. They are not the same. But you know the entire thing, it's going to get ignored. And it is being ignored or massively downplayed. That's what you have. Republicans, they're going to basically ignore it. Trump denied it already. Fox News, you've seen it, downplayed, 37 seconds. And of course, you're going to have Tucker Carlson, who will come up with a conspiracy to somehow blame Antifa, Black Lives Matter, the left, or something. Or George Soros. That's what happens, all right? So this is going to be deeply frustrating, I think, for all of us to watch, come true in real time. We're going to see all of that. But hear me now, quote me later. All I wish is that we could have some damn justice in this country and actually hold people accountable for what happened, hold Trump accountable for what happened on January 6th. Visualizing the stable genius trying to flush his burner phone, and it's not a cartoon. Why will this flow and not flush? Damn water restriction in California. The toilets aren't powerful enough. Thanks for giving me that that whole mental image. Appreciate that. Okay. Here we go again. More crap.
Why did the mayor of Moscow's wife give the Bidens, both of them, $3.5 million for them? That's a lot of money. She gave him $3.5 million. So now I would think Putin would know the answer to that. I think he should release it. I think we should know that answer.
That was former President Donald Trump, essentially calling on Russian President Vladimir Putin to help him by releasing dirt on Joe Biden. This was not old. This was new. This was during an interview with Just the News founder John Solomon. Now, if that seems familiar, well, it's because it's not the first time he has called on the Russians to help him. Take a look.
If Russia or China or any other country has those emails, I mean, to be honest with you, I'd love to see them. Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing. I think you will probably be rewarded mightily by our press.
Okay, so look, that was back in 2016. Oh, look, he's calling for it again. Oh, that's weird. That's weird. And by the way, going back to that first video, like, they added the music. I didn't add that. So, look, here we have, once again, a former president asking a foreign country to provide dirt against his political opponents. So now, look, was there an investigation on Hunter Biden? And because that's what this whole thing's about. There's actually one that was Republicans, and it's basically a sham investigation. And then there was another investigation that's currently ongoing by Delaware, including some possible financial crimes. So those are interesting. So now let me go into the details, right? So now the Republican sham investigation, according to Politico, was largely a compilation of previously public information. Some of it rehashed by witnesses, alleged witnesses who already testified during the House impeachment inquiry last year, as well as news articles and strongly worded insinuations, with little to no evidence to back it up, what they were saying. Now, the report states that Hunter Biden's role at Burisma cast a shadow over U.S.-Ukraine policy. Oh, really? That's very interesting. So what effect did that have on Biden's decision-making when it came to Ukraine? Did it have any? Not that I can see. So now, unrelated, of course, you have another investigation. This is the U.S. Attorney's Office in Delaware that's investigating Hunter Biden's finances, his taxes, whether or not he did, tax evasion or things like that, or money laundering. And so those are some very, very important, consequential investigations. In fact, Politico reported that at the time that the Securities Fraud Unit in the Southern District of New York had scrutinized Biden's finances, Hunter Biden's. The Wall Street Journal reported on Monday that the federal tax investigation into Hunter is gaining momentum, with prosecutors in Delaware seeking information and grand jury testimony in recent weeks. So now that's interesting, but what does that have to do with Joe Biden? And I think that's the ultimate question here. What does this have to do with Joe? What does this have to do with Ukraine? What is Donald Trump hoping to prove here by making these claims? Like that the Ukrainians attempted and failed to influence Joe Biden using his son? Now, look, I'm not at all surprised if a foreign country wants to, give somebody an important figure a job, a political figure or the son of a political figure or a daughter, etc., to have some influence. Well, I mean, that sucks. That's pay to play. And I see that. And we all see that, and we think that's awful, right? But at the same time, okay, to gauge whether or not there is actual corruption from the politician, you have to look at their decisions, right? And so what decisions were influenced by Joe Biden or by Hunter Biden being on this board? What decisions did that make Joe Biden make? I don't really see anything. And so what? You got him? Y'all, you nailed him. You nailed him. Yep. So what would it prove if Hunter Biden did some shady tax stuff? Well, it wouldn't really prove anything other than Hunter Biden's a bad boy. Okay. But again, is Joe Biden blocking that investigation? Is he publicly talking about that investigation? Is he using back channel or whatever private resources to stop Hunter Biden from being prosecuted or stop this investigation? No, none of that is happening. He's not being involved. And so that's, I think, the really important thing is that Joe Biden is not out there providing legal cover or doing anything that we know of to help Hunter Biden fight off these investigations. Now, if we remember the Trump family, you better believe Donald Trump would be involved in attempting to block these investigations. You see what I mean? And now the other thing that's important is that Hunter Biden was never in government. He's not a government official. He doesn't have a political position, unlike Jared or Ivanka Trump. And so, look, what you have here is a situation that's not the same. Now, look, Ivanka and Jared made billions of dollars off being White House advisors. Kushner tried to use U.S. foreign policy to secure loans from Middle Eastern countries, basically, trying to get to the UAE, and then the Saudi Arabians to try to fund his one of his failing Manhattan residences. And all of these deals were trying to enrich him. Then you had Ivanka using her position or her father's position as president to get special deals with China. And so you have all of this stuff. You want to talk about foreign deals? Okay. You want to talk about corruption? Okay. How about trying to illegally withhold billions of dollars in military aid to Ukraine in order to try to get dirt on Biden? Now, aid that the Ukrainians were proven to eventually needed, since, Russia currently is bombing them right now. How about the fact that Trump himself sought to do business with the very same government, the very same officials that he accuses Hunter Biden of doing business with back in the 1990s? How about when Trump was trying to pursue high-profile real estate deals in Russia as recently as 2016, the Trump Tower deal? And so, look, it's almost as if Trump is trying to distract everybody, is, trying to get people in trouble for the very corruption that he and his family have been involved in. Weird. And now, openly calling, once again, on Russian hackers to try to get this information, this alleged information. No, it's ridiculous. All right. Let's go to the last story here. Make fun of CBS News. Corporate media giant CBS News is getting a lot of pushback for hiring a former Trump staffer, Mick Mulvaney, and bringing him on as an analyst. So now Mick Mulvaney, of course, had led the Office of Management and Budget and served as Trump's acting chief of staff. So, pretty high up position, very important, not a coffee boy or anything like that. And And so, look, he served in the Trump administration, and big surprise, he lied. In fact, he's a serial liar, and he lied all the time for Donald Trump. And so let me share just some of these lies. Back in 2017, he accused the Obama administration of essentially cooking the books on jobs numbers. Turns out to be false. We're just saying that they have a lower, they claim that they had a lower unemployment rate, but really, they didn't. Yeah, no, they actually did have a lower unemployment rate. And of course, look, when it comes to the jobs numbers, every administration uses this trick. So they basically don't count certain people. People that have been unemployed for longer than 6 months, people who are underemployed, things like that. And so, look, that's that situation. Nonetheless, even using that metric, which is usually very favorable to an administration, Mick Mulvaney still had to lie about the Obama administration. All right, but there's more. He also lied about crime in the U.S.-Mexico border, claiming that in 2018 they had arrested a whopping 17,000 criminals. Criminal aliens, they say. In fact, it turns out way less, about 10,000 less, a total of 6,259 immigrants with criminal convictions were encountered by Border Patrol. In fact, many of them were not violent criminals, because you think, oh, the criminal aliens, right? They must be violent. There must be something wrong here. No. Actually, they were only charged with illegal entry into the United States. So nonviolent, basically trespassing. Oh, wow. Mulvaney also fudged the numbers on Trump's budget, said one of his budgets would balance the budget. Wasn't true at all. In fact, Trump increased the debt by a lot with his tax cuts for the rich. And of course, Mulvaney then lied about the quid pro quo when it comes to Ukraine, the administration trying to withhold Ukraine military aid for that country in exchange for making a public declaration that they were doing an investigation into Joe Biden during an election. And so that's just some of the ridiculous lies that Mick Mulvaney had told on behalf of the Trump administration. And now I want to show you the warm welcome that CBS is giving them. And then he's going to go and do what he always does, say things that are false.
So here to discuss is Mick Mulvaney. He's a former Office of Management and Budget Director. And today I am pleased to welcome him as a CBS News contributor. So happy to have you here. Thank you so much. You're the guy to ask about this. So we learned yesterday that some of the plan is, the proposal is to tax some of the richest Americans in this country in a way that they have not been taxed before. Can you sort of explain the proposal for us and how it would work?
Yeah, really simple. Keep in mind that the proposal is just that. There won't be a lot of details to it because this is a budget document. But the rough idea is this, is that somehow the government will identify households that are worth more than $100 million, and that somehow those folks will be taxed so that they pay at least 20% tax. It's unclear if that's tax on income or wealth. It really is a very different way of measuring wealth in this country, Emery. We've never taxed wealth before. We've taxed income. In fact, the Constitution might not even allow a property tax. It does specifically allow an income tax, but that's the basic framework. We'll find out how much money you've got on things like unrealized stock gains, businesses that you might own. And even though you didn't make money off of that last year, we're still going to tax you on it. That's the basis of the proposal.
All right, so the first thing I want to address before I get into the details of what he's talking about, because I think that's relevant, because it really shows what role they're giving him at CBS News. And I think that's relevant to the hiring decision. But let me just say that it was super, super gross to see that anchor have to debase herself by saying, "Oh, we're so happy for you to be here. We just love you, Mick Mulvaney. Oh, I just love you. Thank you so much. Welcome, welcome, welcome." Shut up. Gross. Disgusting. Now, that said, let's get to the details, right? They bring on Mick Mulvaney to cry about rich people getting taxed. That's what it is. Now, look, Biden's modest proposal, and I actually think that it's a positive thing. Yes, we're going to tax the rich a little bit more. It would include a minimum rate for all Americans with a wealth of more than $100 million. If enacted, the minimum rate would be about 20% of this group's total annual income. So it is essentially a wealth tax. Now, look, it's a wealth tax on unrealized gains, which would be fantastic. Now, look, let's not get into whether or not this will actually get through Congress. I think very unlikely, but nonetheless, Biden is touting this like, hey, this is what I want to do with our budget. All right. So now, again, the tax would be on unrealized gains, unsold stocks and bonds. Now, look, the reason that they're taxing that is to prevent rich people from hiding their wealth in unrealized assets. That has been a problem for a long time. What we've seen is a shift away from income, compensation in the form of a paycheck, in the form of an income, which is taxed at currently 21%. The Biden administration plan would bring it up to 28. I think it needs to be much higher. I mean, it's high. 28% would be still lower than the Obama administration. Nonetheless, right? All right. But you've seen that shift away, okay? And so now a lot of executives who don't need a paycheck, who don't need an income to survive because they're already super wealthy, they get their wealth mainly through dividends or, of course, money from sold assets, which are taxed at a lower rate currently than traditional income. That's why rich people actually end up paying less of the percentage, in taxes than we do. In fact, we pay a lot more of our income as a percent to the federal government in taxes than rich people. In fact, I've got some devastating numbers on that one. But first, look, rich people, that money in those unrealized assets sits there untaxed. And they just hold on to it. Look, and again, they don't sell because they don't really need to sell. They're already rich. They can also have access to very, very low interest loans that we do not have access to, or, as I mentioned, live off dividends, which are taxed at a lower rate. That's how they pay less. That's how they pay less. In fact, let me give you an example of how little they pay. Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett's an investor. He's at Berkshire Hathaway. And according to Forbes, between 2014 and 2018, he made about $24.3 billion. Over those years, Buffett paid about $23.7 million in taxes. His tax rate at that time, between those years, is 0.1%. 0.1% tax rate. Jesus Christ. That's about 10 cents for every $100 he added to his wealth. Jeff Bezos, formerly the CEO of Amazon, paid a 1.1% tax rate on his billions of dollars within that same time period. And so look, and by the way, Amazon itself paid almost nothing in federal taxes for several years. And so that's how little the extremely wealthy in this country pay in taxes. And a lot of it is thanks to these unrealized gains. If you go after these unrealized gains, and you actually tax them at 20%, even 20%, that's gonna lead to billions of dollars in revenue. That's good. That's good. So now there is no reason, absolutely no reason, poor people should be paying more of a percentage of their income than the richest people on the planet. It's an absolute disaster. It's disgusting. But understand, this is who Mick Mulvaney represents. Rich people. And by the way, that is exactly why CBS News hired him. They thought, no, here's a guy who will shamelessly lie to the American public, because we've seen him, we watch him in real time, lie to the American people, and he'll do anything he can to protect corporate rule. Remember, he's the one who also lied about the gains of Donald Trump's tax cuts. And so, look, He lied on behalf of the most corrupt administration in recent history. Hell yeah, let's get him on. Yeah, yo, hire him. Yes, let's do it. Now, the pushback for CBS was absolutely swift. Matt Negrin, host of Hardball, taking over for Chris Matthews, actually had a big problem with this. Here's one tweet in a thread, quote, CBS News did not mention a single time in the segment this morning that Mulvaney worked for Trump, lied about the Ukraine quid pro quo, or anything he did as a liar for Trump. CBS News is legitimately lying to the public to rehabilitate the image of a Trump official. True. Tim Fullerton says, and now to give us a totally not slanted rundown of President Biden's tax plan is known liar, tax fraud, and former OMB and chief of staff to former President Trump, Mick Mulvaney. Notice how she didn't say any of that. Interesting. Lachlan Markey says, just a reminder, as he downplayed COVID publicly and portrayed mitigation measures as a scheme to damage Donald Trump, Mick Mulvaney was liquidated as much as $550,000 in stock holding. Remember, that is taxed at a smaller percentage than normal income that you and I would make. Yeah. He made all that money and paid very, very little taxes on it. Nicole Sandler points out Mick Mulvaney is now a CBS News commentator. What the actual fuck? I think we can all agree with that one. Jordan Zakarin, in a couple of tweets, said this: looking forward to CBS News inviting Ginny Thomas to break down the 1/6 committee findings. And then added, Mick Mulvaney wasn't just a key player in the corrupt Trump administration. He was one of the most extreme anti-tax, anti-government spending Republicans in D.C. He exists to stop taxes on billionaires. And then added, and I love this line, it's like inviting Greg Abbott on to analyze power grids and trans rights. God damn. 100%. So look, shameful for CBS. Once again, proving that they're not really an actual news organization, but just a spokesperson, a front for giant multinational corporations in order to push their agenda. We need a real media in this country. We do not have it. All right. That's all I got today. Well, let's do some super chats here before we head out for the day. Let's see. I want to thank Mr. Shadow for a couple of super chats. Like you and others, I watch Fox News and other conservative stations to keep up with their pushing. And it's so damn stressful to watch that garbage. Thank you for your progressive commentary. Well, thank you, Mr. Shadow, for your support. I really, really appreciate that. Also, correction, Fox, quote unquote, news. Yeah. And then Gabby Mathis, thank you for the very kind $5 super sticker. Really appreciate that. Really appreciate that. All right. Twitch here. Let's go to Twitch. Thank you. Oh, having some fun here. Yvonne Trey, thank you for resubbing for a month of tier 1 for 2 months. Appreciate that. RC Tycoon 13, thank you for resubbing with Prime. Hey, that's another thing that you can do. Take Jeff Bezos' money and give it to me. I love it. I'll take Bezos' money, and then I'll make fun of him. Madi Darno, thank you for resubbing with Prime as well for 6 months. Nice, nice. And thank you for gifting a tier 1 sub to Phaedrus 2. Awesome. Really appreciate that. I love to see the gifting in the community, not only because it helps me, but it also fosters a better, closer community where people are giving each other gift subs, and that's good to see. Very, very good to see. And then thank you, Madi Darno, for the additional 100 biddies. Appreciate that. Appreciate that. All right, so that's Twitch here. Thank you to everybody on Facebook as well. On and on for the for the subby, for becoming a member. Please like and share the stream if you haven't already. Really, really appreciate it. So, that said, thank you all. Love you. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, nation. We'll see you all tomorrow. Have a great night.
I will eat your ass. I have not loved this conversation.
Sexual anarchy.
Disappointed!
Obama.
They're kicking me out the door. They're kicking me out the door.